Hello chess fans, today I'm doing a little bit of a different video. So I'm going to be doing a video on tournament preparation. And I'm not so much gonna focus on how exactly you do tournament preparation. I'm more so just gonna look at a bunch of chess lines, and I highly recommend checking out the timestamps to see if there's anything here you're interested in. It's sure to teach you a little bit more of theory, and yeah, I'm just gonna jump right into it. So this weekend, when you're seeing this, I will be playing in a tournament, and I have a few games to play. And so there are some lines I want to prepare. I've already looked at my opponent's sort of repertoires pretty extensively, but I want to talk over what I'm basically looking to prepare. So I've created a steady, and basically it consists. Oops, sorry. It consists of many games of what my opponents have done. And so the first thing I wanted to do was to show you guys what I think I want to play at the tournament. So I haven't really decided to move on d4, but against e4, I've decided to play a very strange move, knight c6. And it's always been sort of my style to play these sort of offbeat sort of things to confuse my opponents, and I will know these positions better than my opponents. So here I expect a few moves. Now, from some of the more timid players, I expect this move, knight c3. And this move basically is just like, please go back into e5 positions. And while I could go e5, I think after bishop c4, this position is actually fairly reasonable for the white pieces. The move d6 I think is fairly ambitious because after d3 you try for knight a5, or you basically try to go for this move with h6 g5 plans if they ever play knight f3. Very ambitious plan. I think here knight a5 and for example like bishop b3 and capturing that should be sufficient to prove some counterplay. Here f5 is interesting. So I think because knight f3, the main line after d3, I've always generally like hated this position. I really just hate this for both colors. I hated it for black and I tried it as white and I hated it too. After knight a5, the position gets so confusing. I remember there was this move played against me. I'm trying to remember. Yeah, knight ge2, and after it takes, I just really didn't think that black has much counterplay here. So I think I'm going to stick with this d6 move. So after knight c6, they also have other moves other than knight c3. So after here, I want to go e5. If knight f3, I am totally okay with playing the 4 knights because, okay, if my opponent really wants to play 4 knights, they're not going for much of an advantage, and I think that it should be equalized pretty quickly. And yeah. Okay, so against knight c3, I'm perfectly willing to play e5. Now against knight f3, here's where maybe it becomes a little bit difficult. So now I think some of my opponents will play this, and if I'm going to get either 3 blacks or 2 blacks, hoping I draw a higher seed and get 2 blacks, but here I think I'm going to have to play e5, and I'm just going to have to let my opponent sort of get what they want at e4, while avoiding sort of the bishop c4 lines and other lines like that. Now here, if bishop c4, there's actually this interesting nuance that now you can switch to a French sort of setup, and so this is impossible. And I know one of the players in particular is very fond of e4, bishop c4, so after knight f3 here, bishop c4, I can pretty much get him out of his bishop's opening sort of territory because he no longer has the ability to commit the f-pawn because he already moved the knight there. So what I expect from most players is the move d4. And here, I thought long and hard on what to play. So there's a lot of moves you can play here. e6 is honestly not that bad a move. And this is sort of the idea. You play this setup with f6. And I feel like for people who have never seen it before, it's fairly reasonable. But it doesn't do that well. And I really don't like the positions after f5. I think there's this line after d takes here, knight f3 takes, that has pretty much proven this to be refuted. This position is scoring huge for white in both the databases. And so I think that more likely is what I'm going to play is the move d5. So d5 is the main line. So there's only really one move for advantage here, and it's e5. But assuming that they do something else, for example, if they go knight c3, which is a very common move here, and what I think is a mistake, after here, d5, and a move like knight b8 or knight e5, both are moves here. Probably knight b8 seems a little bit better. If knight takes e4, we can go for c6. And obviously they never want to trade queens. For example, if takes is simply better for black. So they don't want to do that. So after c6, maybe bishop c4. I'm just looking at engine lines here in theory, and I'm trying to figure out what is sort of reasonable. So something like takes. And okay, seems like an interesting line. We could probably play this. So knight takes d4 looks the most natural. Now let's look at knight e5. Does that give more winning prospects? If knight takes e4, e6 is already slightly better for black. Okay, or equal for black. So good to know. So queen d4 would be the main move. Looks very natural here. And queen takes e4. Wow. Allowing knight f6, queen a4, bishop d7, bishop b5, a6. Takes. Queen takes d7, knight takes d7. The pawn here looks fairly weak. It looks like a position my opponent would not want to play, considering they play the Alekhine. So I don't really know who I'm going to get this against, but I'm fairly confident against that move. Now against takes here, I think after takes here, the position is just very pleasant. For example, if bishop e3, you have this e5 instantly equalizing. Knight c3, bishop e4. I think this transposes to some gambit line. I'm not exactly sure. So most people will go knight f3 here. And here you can go e5, and I feel like it's kind of an underrated move, because after something like knight c3, bishop b4, bishop d2, something like takes, and e4, this position I think is fairly underrated. And then, yeah, wherever they move, black has more space, and I kind of like black's position. But I think even more testing these days is bishop g4. And okay, of course, if any knight here ever, I think queen h5 followed by here is pretty self-explanatory. For example, bishop e2, knight f6, or castles queenside. Knight f6, if they ever go h3, remember they're not threatening anything. And if they castle here, castles followed by e5, just looks pretty pleasant. And if they go for something, if they go for something like bishop e2, I think simple castle king side here. If c4, we have this move queen f5 or queen h5. Feel both are very interesting. And I think here you're sure to get advantage. This position is roughly equal. I remember that after bishop e3, I always hate playing when my opponent finds this move. It's very annoying. After bishop takes, knight takes d4, bishop takes here, you have this nice move, queen e3. This is transposed into Scandinavian, actually. After here, queen e4 with a double attack. There's no way to defend this. And after here, takes. This is supposed to be a gambit. Now, if any of my opponents know this, I think that I would be in a little bit of trouble here, because black is doing historically pretty badly there, but the gambit is not supposed to be fully sound. So it's supposed to give black a very minute advantage, but should probably be a draw. So I don't expect any of my opponents will do that. What I expect is to move e5. And here again, you have two moves. You can go e6, you can transpose, but not really one of the plans here. You can go f6, which I think is an interesting move. And here the move says f4. I was not familiar with this. I'm only really familiar with bishop b5, and that's what I thought would be the idea, and that's why this line's not really played. So I think bishop f5 is much stronger, and you basically have the Caro-Kann idea. We've played d5, and we haven't committed e6, but we have a knight on c6. So again, we've made a concession. Whether a pawn on c6 or a knight on c6 is better, it's hard to say. Now, considering the Caro-Kann is a good opening and this is a bad opening, I think that it's fair to say the Caro-Kann did it better. So now here, there's many moves. Now, in a game, I had my opponent play knight f3 against me, and after e6, my opponent played bishop e2, and after this move knight b4, I thought I was pretty comfortably better. Something like this. Okay, the engine doesn't like c5 at all. The engine likes just going back here. c5 here. I thought that after knight c6, I just have a perfect French. Oh, c4, wow. You've got to be careful when you get your bishop outside the pawn chain that it doesn't get exploded like this. White can't really do this in a French. Okay, so yeah, just misplaced the thing, and if he ever goes c4, you can take there. Okay, so maybe knight b4 isn't as good a move as I thought. f6 is the other move that says to be equalizing. Now if he takes, simple queen takes, bishop d6, build up here, looks very pleasant. So after bishop e2, f6 seemingly is equalizing. So I think that's enough prep for that line. Now if c3, I think is another critical move. Here, okay, e6 is the most played move in the database, and here bishop d3 is fairly common. And after takes, queen takes, a move like f6. I think this is fairly the whole entire idea of our setup. And here, followed by castles queenside, knight f3, knight h6. It actually starts to look fairly unpleasant. So let's look and explore another option, knight g7, defending here. Now if b4, wow, that's a move. Knight f3 looks pretty natural to me, but then after f6, I think this, I guess, is good for me. And it looks like the sort of enterprising position I would like to play. And yeah, okay, so after knight e2, which is another move, f6, f4. Okay, just keeping the f pawn flexible. What if he goes f4 immediately? Why is this not a playable move? Takes, knight f5, and there's no h4 because of g4 because of here, and after here, h5, we keep solid. We probably get this out of the way, go here, and okay, we've gotten rid of our worst piece. So I think that's enough prep for this sort of line. I think if c3 immediately, this e6 followed by f6, and if I ever see bishop d3, knight g7, one line more I want to check is if he goes bishop b5. I always get annoyed by this. So knight e7 is reasonable. Let's say knight f3, a6, and okay, he has nothing better than to return. Okay, f6. Okay, that makes a lot of sense to me. So I think I'm done preparing the Nimzovitch. And you might ask why I'm planning to play the Nimzovitch. So natively, I can play pretty much anything. I slightly prefer playing some things like the French and e5 and more of the main lines. But I also have been known to play the Pirc and other things like that. But the main reason I decided to do this is because I think that everyone knew who they were playing a while before. And I know I shouldn't be afraid of any prep because I seriously doubt any of my opponents are going to prep for me. They're all older and probably don't prep. They probably just play the same repertoire. But I think that I'll catch a lot of my opponents off guard. A lot of them had much more experience in their openings, however dubious they may be. And I feel like practically when somebody's playing an opening they've played 100 times versus something that I've prepped, I've noticed that in previous experiences, I often lose. So yeah, that's pretty much what I believe about the black. That's what I want to play as black against e4. Against d4, I'm not really expecting many d4s, but in the case of this, in previous tournaments I played d6 here, and I think if I'm against a lower rated player, like if I'm against one of the lower seeds, I'm around the 3rd seed and there's 6 players, so if I'm against a low rated seed, I might go for this. I have a feeling against a top seed, last time I played, he played e4. I feel like he's going to be more booked up in the Pirc, and I'm not really looking to challenge someone theoretically with the Pirc. It's kind of a bad opening. So I might play that against a lower rated player who I think might play knight f3 or c4 or let me get some sort of nonsense position. But probably I'm going to be sticking to this. And we're going to have to see a Catalan in some position. I'm going to e6 or c4. Yeah, this was not a good move order. But against the Catalan, I think that I'm either going to go for the open or this pretty cool line. I think it's fairly interesting. And it definitely does not have a lot of exposure. For example, after knight f3, something like castles, followed by c6, knight e4. And the whole reason you bring the bishop e2 is because after knight e4, you want to take it. So I think it's a pretty easy setup to learn, and I think it's something that I highly recommend. You basically are just playing the closed Catalan, except you're just playing a stonewall setup. You're going to do this, bring this guy over here, rook lifts, and I think black doesn't really get equality in any lines, but it's very easy to play, and black's win rates are doing good here on Lichess. And if I had more time, and if I ever want to seriously deal with the Catalan, I think another line that I was highly considering is after knight a3 to play this move bishop b4. Now knight c6 I've played against my 2300 opponent before, and after queen a4, my opponent sadly after something like here, he kind of knew his theory. Takes, knight takes, and yeah, I lost this game when we played online, and I wasn't really happy with the position. I didn't really see many winning prospects I could use against a lower rated player, so I decided to archive that for now. Bishop b4 I think is another interesting move, and after here just going for a5, and the idea is okay, if he takes he's worse. Now queen c2 threatening the pawn might be interesting, but after takes here you have this move b5, and this position is about equal. Now I looked through these lines and I didn't really find chances for black to win, and I really would like to beat this guy, so I think I would have to look for that other line where I think it's much less theoretical, but this just feels very unpleasant. And here he already knew the best move. The best move here is b3, which he has played in online games. If a4 here, you have c6. And I feel like this position is even better for black. It's not better for black, but after b3 now, c takes and something like knight takes, looking for here. I think the position just makes a little bit more sense for me after he's committed a4. If he does it without committing a4, for example, after takes and something like a takes, I always found this position to be more unpleasant because this is stuck on the half open pile. This is stuck on the half open pile. His knight's coming to c5. So I just have another pawn on a half open pile that I thought was unpleasant. So basically, that's my preparation in the Catalan. I don't really expect many d4s. I'll try to play a Nimzo or basically whatever. So next we have to deal with English. I don't really expect any Englishes, and they're ready. I might expect one ready, and I think I could go for that setup I talked about earlier, but more than likely after the ready, I'm gonna go for d5. And after d4, I kind of just have to play the Queen's Gambit declined, or I can decide to play the Queen's Gambit accepted if I really want to. For example, after e3, either e6, c5, bishop g4 is one of my lines that doesn't really work, but yeah, lots of moves here. Okay, so now I'm gonna look at what I want to do with white. So there's a lot of things I've been considering, and I think I'm probably gonna stick with e4. Now, why do I think I'm going to stick with e4? I think it's the most solid thing I play, and I think that in classical, I don't really have that much experience with the other lines I like playing, which are the Jobava London. I'm obviously a big Jobava London advocate. I play this all the time, and I really like this, but it offers no advantage, and I feel like I do have a lot of games on my account with it. I'm not too afraid of my opponents prepping for me because I play pretty much everything. So I did have a look at the Alekhines, and the reason I had a look at the Alekhines is because I believe one of my opponents is going to play the Alekhine defense. So this is the line basically that I prepared, or sorry, this is a game that he played recently that he lost as black, and I thought I would try to use it as an example. Now, whether he deserved to lose this as black from the opening, it's probably that he was much worse from the opening, but he got a big advantage here. He got a big advantage as black, and then he just blundered. Here he went queen d7. And yeah, with those kind of ideas, he's lost. So I thought that it might be a little bit dubious to go for this when I don't know it as well. So I'm gonna try to find a chapter where is it this one? No. It's not this one. 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 Okay, so maybe it's the first chapter. Sorry, this is a little bit unprofessional, but okay, I guess I lost what I had prepared. So what I'm basically going to try to play is I'm going to try to refute the Alekhines right from the opening. I'm going to go for c4. Notice that if you go for d4, I think you allow more options, like knight b6 right away. I guess it transposes. So what do you allow? I remember there's some reason that c4 first is very slightly more accurate because it forces here. Yeah, I don't remember why. But, okay, yeah, c4 then d4. I guess if you go d4 right away, they can go d6, and you're kind of feinting that you might play knight f3. You might play it. Or you could just go for c4. And after here, I'm looking to play the move f4. Now, f4 has gone in and out of the limelight for a while. I believe this is probably the best move. And I've prepped a lot of things here, like g6 and bishop f5, but I'm not going to go over any of the sidelines. I'm going to go over takes. And what I highly expect from my opponent is c5. Now, c5 is a very dangerous and dubious move, but it's really, really, really often played by these Alekhine players. They love this move, c5. It's very difficult, because after here, for example, if g3, knight c3, bishop g7, I think after bishop f4, this position is borderline just completely winning for white. After here, queen d2, looking for something like this in the future. If f6 ever, we go e6, completely locked out of the game. Knight stuck, bishop stuck, everything is stuck. Now e6, which might be the best move. Bishop f5 is a very sad move because after h3, g4, you're getting your bishop trap. Oh, sorry. So after e6, either castles or d6. Here, let's see what has a better lead chess win rate. I think that's going to be more reflective of what I'm going to play like. So castles seems to be better. And here after the move takes, c takes, and this move, bishop g4. Black is doing very well here in the Masters database, which confuses me. This is a position we could get. And here black is doing well. So it doesn't make sense to me why black should be doing well. So let's just look at other options. Let's look at d6. d6 is apparently the best move. Knight c6 here. Now if f6, what's the move? h4. Now very unnatural. So I think keeping the pawn on d5 looks to be more natural to me. So after e6, d6 doesn't make much sense to me. What about bishop e2? This move's never been played before, and the engine says one of the best moves. Takes. Rook e8 looks natural to me, putting pressure here. Now bishop g4, putting pressure again. Castles, takes here to win a pawn. Rook takes. Now bishop takes e5. Rook takes, and I'm guessing d6. d6, knight c6. And it's equal. So instead rook a d1, and okay, all the advantage has pretty much been slipped. So obviously that's not a good line then. So instead here, after knight f3, bishop g4, yeah, engine doesn't say any advantage. So bishop e2 is obviously not a move. Here, if they take, we take back, and bishop g4, rook e1, c4, h3. Let's try to prove advantage here. Should we play g4 actually? Okay, here an engine saying knight f3 is a much better move. Makes sense. You want to go knight d4. You want to defend this also. The bishop's not going anywhere. Knight a6, looking for knight b4 to jump in these squares. Makes a lot of sense to me. Now, moves that make sense to me here are obviously not here because then they can get in on more dark squares. d6, I'm not really sure the idea. Maybe to prevent the queen from getting in, but d6 seems to be like the best move. So let's see what to do on d6. Knight c5. Okay, looking at from dark squares, and we trade off the bishops. Now let's say they just trade and oblige and then go here. Takes here, knight g5 would be winning the game on the spot. So I'm not really trying to think too much here. I'm trying to basically just guide the engine to tell me what to do to see if my opening is sound. Let's say here, takes, queen takes. Now obviously this is not going to happen, but I'm just seeing if I can see any ideas from the position. Bishop, queen g7, takes. Rook e5, threatening here. Now that gives up this, but I guess we win here. So I'm going to stop going down that rabbit hole. That's never going to happen. But in case we see the c5 line, which is one of the many lines I'm expecting, I feel like I'm confident in my chances to win that position. So now knight f6 and bishop f5 are other moves. So knight f6, you have to play bishop f3, and here the only move is bishop f5. And after knight c3, they have a few options. After e6, they have a few options. Now here you have two options. You can go knight f3 or bishop e2. Now, some people say it really doesn't matter what you do. They're going to transpose. But I think knight f3 allows this move bishop g4, which is not a good move. It's actually worse than the main line, but I think after takes and knight takes c4, we're not doing well. So we have to take with a g-pawn. And after queen h4, bishop f2, I never really enjoyed these positions. I feel like black gets some counterplay in the center. So why allow that option? Play bishop e2. Cunning move. Black has really nothing they can do to prevent this, and it's going to transpose. Now, what I think the most annoying move here is very underrated is bishop b4. Now, bishop b4 I lost to twice online. The idea after knight f3 is to go for this move, knight a5. Attacking that, and here after c5, knight d5, caused me a lot of problems. After bishop d2, bishop takes c3, b takes c3. Apparently here I'm supposed to be much better, and I do understand why. I have the bishop pair, I have this half open file, but I think this bishop is really good, and it's definitely hard to play. So I don't expect my opponent to do that. I find that to be the most annoying line. Here, bishop e7, knight f3, castles is what I kind of expect to happen after here. Bishop takes, queen d2, developing the queen. A move like queen e7 or queen d7, and here the cunning move king h1. That's all you have to remember in these positions. The rook is probably going to come either to d1 and e1, and the queen goes to c1, and slowly you press on the position looking for d5 at some point, pushing the pawns up the board and just looking not to create weaknesses. So here you would be much better. So that's the main line of the 4 pawns attack. Obviously you're not going to win outright against the Alekhine, but I feel like it's a very respectable option. So, I've talked about a lot of sort of variations that I'm looking to play. And I have some more prep against the Catalan and the Sicilian in case either of my opponents look to play one of those two setups. Now, finally, I'm going to look at what to play against the specific line of the Modern. After here, bishop here, and c5. I know one of my opponents in the tournament tends to play this, and I plan to play this move, bishop e3. Now, bishop e3 is a completely unknown move, and I feel like it will really catch my opponent off guard. Now, if takes, I really don't expect my opponent to play this, because after here in e5, knight h5, this position looked so bad to me when I was first looking at it, but it becomes more and more reasonable the more you look at it. Here in simple knight g2, and if knight c6, it's actually a blunder, trapping the knight. Now, a few people on leeches have actually fell for this, which I think is fairly funny, but instead d6 and a move like e takes, queen takes, for example, takes, would leave white in a completely winning position. So I think this line is fairly dubious, so I don't expect my opponent to play it. And queen a5 is what was giving me problems. Now, I haven't actually looked at this line, so let's see some lines. Queen d2, c takes d4, makes sense. Knight f3 is being claimed to be the best move, so if takes, bishop takes, knight f6, queen d2, let's say knight c6, makes sense to me. So then bishop takes here, and knight d5. Okay, threatening here. King takes, rook b8, takes, and here white should be better. Okay, I think I would like to play this position because, okay, only white can really press. Hard to say. Okay. So knight f3, takes. Seems very natural. Knight f6 here is the most played move. And then after queen d2, c takes, knight c6. It looks like we're getting some sort of line of the dragon here, and that looks really good for me. My opponent clearly doesn't want that. So what if they don't take? What other moves do they have? Knight c6 looks possible, and then after d5, knight b4. That looks like a really sad. a3 doesn't do anything. Here e5 was even tried. Knight g4 and then bishop f4. Wow, that looks killer. Yeah, so I think that this line is pretty good. What about queen d2 right away? C takes is completely equal. So knight f3 followed by here. If here, then queen d2. Knight g4 looks kind of strange. Here, takes, and it's impossible to guard this here, and we'd win this pawn. If he takes here, rook b1, let's say he goes back. I'm just looking for winning ideas. Bishop a5. I remember this one. Okay, so I think about deals with that opening. Another line you can consider is this one, but I see no reason to go into this main line. I know this is definitely very reasonable going for this, but after bishop knight a6, my opponent has way more experience than me in this positions. Black is objectively not losing. Objectively they are losing, but practically I think it's far from it. Now next, I always have this prep if my opponent ever goes for a6. I know they'd like to do this. G4, brilliant move. Check one of my videos in the cards if you don't know this opening. Knight c6 apparently scores really good for black, but after d5, knight e5, h3 is doing well here. So, yeah, okay, so wow. Dominguez Perez have had this a few times. Fabiano Caruana has had this many times. And DeBarley V has had this many times. Okay, so many strong players have had this. Now the idea is b2, bishop g2. Threaten if knight f6 immediately loses to e5. If you don't remember that, I had a game go like that. So bishop e7, h4 threatening here. If h5, simple, takes, followed by bishop f3 and h5. And, okay, yeah. I kind of revealed some of my prep there, but okay, that's fine. Okay, I was looking over g6, right? Sorry, I'm sort of not gonna edit this video because, yeah, we're looking at this a6 g4, b5, bishop g2, knight f6 would lose the game. So bishop b7 takes. Rook takes would be winning for me. Now if h6, which is what I expect from my opponent, here you have the nice move g5. Now if h5, here after knight g2, f4, you are completely winning, and not completely winning because the Pirc is always very difficult to play against. But here I think you have a very comfortable space advantage, and you don't even have to castle queenside. You can walk your king up to g3, play f5 at some point, play e5, and you have this comfortable space advantage. Okay, so that's my line there. And finally, let's look at the Pirc. Yeah, so I do agree this is more of a rough video, but thank you for sticking around. So if my opponent decides to go for this, which I know they have a tendency to do, I plan to go for h4. h4 I think is an excellent move, a very good move that not a lot of people know of. Now, if bishop g7, I am looking fully to play this over the board. I'm completely ready. I've looked over the lines, and I think that black is just completely losing here. They are completely busted. It is dead lost position, and I feel practically this position is near impossible. White does huge here in both the lead chess database and the masters database, and I don't think my opponent will go for that. Many players don't allow that, and many players don't even play h5. Most people do not have the courage to give up the exchange for this. But, okay, minimum, you open up the g file. Your queen's very active, and they have no developed pieces. For example, if b5 here, e5 is actually already just winning. Bishop b7 and e6. Quick way to end the game. Now if takes e6, which is the best course of action, rook d1, knight d7, and bishop g5 is trapping the queen. So many pitfalls you can go wrong here in case you didn't believe me. Now b5 is by no means even remotely good move here. Castles would be suicide as well. Castling into this, e5, okay, it's just murder there. So yeah, that's what I plan to play. Now I highly expect my opponent will be scared and play the move h5 or h6. Now if h6, I haven't actually looked at this move, but let's see what to do on h6. Let the engine think. What if we go h5 still? g5, and it's not so clear. So if h6, let's say queen d2, b5 looks natural, e5, and if takes, queen takes d2, takes here, knight d5, okay, threatening this, king here, bishop a5 would be winning for me. Okay, so rook a7, bishop a5 again, wow. And if knight takes e5, it doesn't look the end of the world. Here goes back, that would be winning because I trapped the king, and here, knight takes, king here, castles, can't block, wow. So brilliant. So takes here, rook h3, bringing the other rook. Okay, that's interesting. Okay, so that seems fairly reasonable, and e5 might be a consideration here. f3 could also be a consideration. Bishop b7, a4 here, and knight d2, looking to reroute. Let's say bishop g7, looks very sensible. Okay, you can't play that right away. c5 seems to just give up a pawn too. So what if he goes a5? That looks to make more sense to me. Knight f2, now bishop g7, castles queenside, and basically, yeah, okay, the king queenside is locked. So that makes a lot of sense to me. I think that my preparation against the modern and the Pirc is almost complete. Now we just need to look at both the modern lines and the Pirc lines with c6. So I know I'm not going any mainline theory, but I think this is a highly useful video for anyone looking for some theory. Okay, so now they can also play this move not against knight f6, against knight g6 here, bishop g7, bishop e3, c6. Now I have no idea what to do against this position. Can we still go for this move g4? Let the engine think. I assume g4 is less good because a6 is not even a developing move, and often flank attacks are a little bit dubious if you can't get them off with your opponent being down. So c6 is not really that much of a waste of tempo because you could also prepare d5. You're also preparing b5, which is another idea, and you can also allow the queen to get out. So maybe not the wisest choice. So after c6, what's another thing I can do? I don't expect this from my opponent. Okay, f4. Makes a lot of sense to me. You're basically playing the a6 position after f4, except that's decent because the bishop gets an eye here. Bishop doesn't even get an eye here. After b5, bishop d3, I assume. Looks good to me. Okay, so that's after that move. So after knight f6, knight c3, g6, bishop e3, c6 is also a move here. Now let's see what I can play here. Now the line that I do know is after h3, bishop g7, f4 here is supposed to be very good for white. Now I was never particularly a fan of that line, so let's try to find a different line. Now queen d2 is always met by b5, and I've never been a fan of this. Been a fan of this from the white side, from the black side. So I don't think I'll play that. Bishop g7, I think my opponent could definitely play. Bishop h6, this line. I've also never been a fan of after e5. I don't like the positions for white, personally, which is why I play them as black. So I think the simplest of choices is to go h3, knight bd7, and f4. And here, I guess I don't really enjoy these positions too much, but it's similar to the last position, except we have to waste the tempo on h3. Seems about fine to me. So yeah, I've spent 33 whole minutes here. My voice is incredibly dry, and I sort of went over what I want to play for this next tournament. So in the upcoming recaps in the next few weeks, I'm probably going to recap all the games, no matter whether I win, lose, or loss, or win or lose. Can't even speak anymore. But I'm going to recap all of them, so you're going to see whether I got my preparation, did I get what I wanted, or did it all fall apart, and did I not get what I wanted. And yeah, I've only been really able to do some tournament preparation today, because in other days, I was busy, I had a test, and other things like that. And yeah, I'm not too serious on preparation this time around. I would go to the database, research my opponent games more, but I think I'm going to generally prepare, make sure my openings are solid, make sure that I get out of the position with playable positions, and that I'm not surprised anywhere. And I think that I shouldn't. I don't think the field is going to produce many opening surprises. Now, to talk about the tournament, there's 5 players, and I'm the third one, as I previously mentioned several times. And yeah, I'm basically looking to come first or second, but I'm looking to get an NM norm. That's my main goal of the tournament. I'm not so worried about if I'm the Nova Scotia, which is what the current tournament is called. It's called Nova Scotia Closed Championship. It's by invitation by the top 6 rated players. And yeah, definitely a great tournament. I hope to get an NM norm, as I said before. So I hope to get around 3.5 out of 5. You can check the games. I'll try to post a link in the description. If I don't, somebody can comment and remind me. But I'll probably be in the midst of the tournament, so I don't know if I'll do it. And so, yeah, I'm hoping the field is all 2,000 plus. I think the lowest rated player is at 2,098, who is formerly up to 2,250 and NM strength. He has the NM title, and the rest of the players are players mostly I've played before and not had great results against. And the top player is a 2390, who I've played several times before. And over the board, he's beat me once, and we've drawn once. And online, he's beaten me 13 times. I think I've beat him twice. And so, yeah, definitely I don't have great results against these guys, but I think that I've gone significantly stronger over the summer. Over this past few months, and I'm looking to get some good games in, especially now I have much less time to study chess. This is probably going to be the only tournament left where I actually have the time to prepare and stuff. And yeah, I've been rambling a long time, but that's what this video is. I'm preparing for the tournament. I'm telling you all my thoughts beforehand, and if you watched all of this video, I'm honestly really shocked, because I'm not sure I would do that myself. Maybe it's a boring video. But yeah, if you gained anything from this video, please remember to leave a like and subscribe. And yeah, hopefully the tournament goes well. I'll see you guys in the next one.